Okay, welcome to our podcast, healthcare or TechPulse podcast, as we call it. And this is our third episode that should be going out. With me is my co-presenter, Jonathan. And today we have the pleasure of having Professor Jag with us. I actually met Professor Jag, first of all, at the XR UK conference, which I know you organised. And it's actually one of the things I really think is one of the benefits of this podcast, is highlighting some of the work going on out there in the healthcare industry using cutting edge technology. Because I certainly was surprised when I attended at how particularly kind of medics are also doing this sort of thing at the same time, and it really was impressive to see. And we're hoping with this podcast as well, we'll be able to showcase some of that to the rest of the world. So just starting with yourself, Professor, I just wanted to understand a bit about your background. So you're a consultant surgeon, I understand.
I'm a head and neck reconstructive surgeon. Well, firstly, thank you for the invitation for the podcast, John and Natif. It was on the back of that XR UK, which is coming back not this year but the following year. It was an opportunity for me to bring together talent throughout the whole UK in the XR industry, and I think it's manifest with outcomes like this. So it certainly did what it was intended to do. In answer to your question, I'm a consultant head and neck maxillofacial reconstructive surgeon. So I remove cancer, I rebuild the face. I'm based at East Grinstead, which has huge historical perspective. During the Second World War, it was one of the pivotal places for reconstruction of wounded military surgeons, particularly RAF soldiers. I'm a professor of surgery at Brighton and Sussex Medical School and a professor of extended reality in medicine and surgery.
Excellent, cool. And do you have any? Is your background mainly medical, right? So your education is through on the medical stream rather than IT or anything like that. Because I'm just trying to work out when that happened.
I learned to code. I can build in Sixtoff, very rudimentary stuff. I understand Unity, Real Engine. I can film in 360. I can create overlays. I can live stream. So from a technical perspective, I have a lot of insight into a lot of that stuff. That's just from very early kind of years of being interested in technology. But I'm a clinician primarily, and I look at how I can adopt these sorts of technologies into clinical environments for surgery, particularly.
Cool. And I've seen, I know you, because I remember you talked about the conference as well. Is it VR IMS or is it XR IMS? Because I've seen both. Are you in the rebrand process?
So no, we're gonna sit with VRiMS. Is the way I think my chief operating officer prefers VRiMS to VRiMS. I wanted a term that kind of encapsulated what I think is the biggest domain for and potential utility of VR, and that is in healthcare. And although a lot of focus is in surgery, we're starting to grow applications in medicine as well. So VRiMS is the company name of which I'm the CEO and founder.
Okay. And when was that founded?
That was founded. Yeah, so the pandemic was the reason for the creation of VRiMS. When the pandemic happened in in the early parts of 2021, this is pre-vaccination days, a complete cessation of proximity in training surgeons. Although I was actually quite busy through COVID as a cancer hub. In fact, my volume of work doubled overnight. But what we found was that we weren't able to train our trainees. And so I started to explore how I could use this technology to train trainees in more than just a webinar. There's a massive influx of people using Zoom as we're on now, and webinars. And I wanted something a little bit more immersive than that. So I started to play around with Sixtoff and started to play around with 360 video. So although the IT tech world wouldn't call 360 video true VR, I kind of encapsulate that with immersive technology because it's still an immersive experience. So I started to play with 360 video, creating things like overlays that kind of overcome some of the inherent problems with using single 360 cameras, and then performing surgery and live streaming that. So that was early COVID, January 2021.
Great.
So Jag, what kind of tipped you over the edge into going into VR XR?
So I think it was realizing that there's a real potential I have a research group in XR. I evaluate a lot of this technology. There's very compelling evidence of its potential role. I talk about this really unique position that this technology has in bringing not only well-established efficiency in learning, you're multiples more likely to acquire or retain information if it's experienced in an immersive environment over and above a webinar or reading a book or watching videos. You're more likely to not only retain but acquire new skills as well. Again, there's some very good evidence and with some good high-level randomized controlled trials comparing skills acquisition. So, but also the more important part for me was looking at how I could use this technology for the global south. So, using it to train surgeons in some of the poorest and most deprived parts of the world. And we use the phrase efficiency in learning, but also equity. So efficiency in training rather, and equity to learning. So once I started going down that journey, I'm even more compelled and convinced that this technology, by building infrastructure, will make a big difference in training surgeons in Africa.
So, Jag, do you want to tell us more about that then, about the training surgeons in Africa? I know that you've created this, what I can only describe as a juggernaut of a movement to kind of get this technology used in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I think there are three pinch points as to why this technology hasn't got widespread adoption. I think the first pinch point was content. And I think traditionally sixed off, in big orthopedic procedures has a value. Procedurally, understanding sequencing has a value. Um, uh, the challenge of sixed off is that it's prohibitively expensive, really expensive to build. You need quite sophisticated headsets to deliver that. But the other big challenge is that when we evaluate this kind of technology using eye tracking, motion capture, and sensors in headsets, it's an artificial environment that doesn't replicate certainly high fidelity kind of surgery, the kind of surgery that I do, which is microvascular surgery. So that's a limitation, but a much easier way to create immersive content is to use 360 video. But of course, you can't film an operation. That's, my operations are 10 to 12 hours long. Nobody's going to sit through that. But what you can do is create content by filming procedures on human tissue or cadavers. And it allows you to demonstrate surgical procedures in a fraction of the time, 15 minutes for a thigh operation that would normally take me 3 hours. Ultra realistic because it's human tissue. We have to protect that resource because it's regulated by the human tissue. So we have a very rigorous standard operating procedure in how we access that content. But that then enabled me to build a massive content, a huge library, more than 300 surgical procedures of every surgical specialty. So that hardware. And after playing with low cost alternatives, live streaming YouTube, of course, then Apple decided to drop its stereoscopic view on iPhone devices, which is a big problem in the UK, obviously, but not in Africa, where most clinicians use Android devices. We just went to the higher end devices like the Picos and the HTCs. And so that but packaged that up in a self-contained unit with just charging. It had a Wi-Fi router, had a tablet, allowed you to be able to use a variety of techniques, including synchronized VR, interactive VR, as well as a sixed off with VR anatomy and a brilliant collaboration we have with 3D Organon. But the final reason why I don't think that this has taken off massively and I've succeeded in doing something that even the big industry players like Meta, HTC, and Pico haven't managed to achieve, the footprint that I have is the human resource to deliver it. I've spent the last 4 months training an entire army of undergraduates and postgraduates to use this technology, more than 150 reps throughout the whole UK. You give somebody in their early 20s this fantastic technology and equip them with all of that, the armamentarium of the full repertoire of techniques with this wonderful library, they're going to be a juggernaut in terms of how they're going to deliver it because they totally get it. And I'm not trying to convince my generation of a technology that will be quite profound, because my generation, amongst some of them, the mindset is that, well, we didn't need it in our day. Why do we need it now? But the goalposts have changed massively. So having the human resources allowed a massive scale up. But I realized that I had to build a hub and spoke model where hardware was accessible through just a simple phone call, an event request, and then suddenly somebody was there who knew how to use it as well. That's the other key, having a technical insight to know how to use the technology. Now, what we're planning this year is to recreate the hub and spoke model in Africa. But before I did that, I went to 9 African countries last year to better understand the problem. Every country has a unique problem, particularly in Africa, neighboring countries, different pathologies, different resources, different um, opportunities for their trainees, so that if I could go and visit these countries, it gave me a much better insight. But more importantly, I got a chance to meet people. When you meet people, you form relationships, you understand what their mindset is and their motivations to want to train and educate their healthcare professionals. And those relationships that I've built allow me to be able to focus and bring the right people to the table. So in 8 weeks' time, I'm bringing 2 surgeons from Burundi. This is a country that has 70% absolute poverty. They're never going to be able to afford a headset. But I'm going to give them an entire package for free. I'm going to donate 6 headsets with all of the full capabilities and all my full library. I'm going to give the highest tech to some of the poorest parts of the world. And I'm going to see what happens. And it's going to be something fantastic. I'm sure of it. We'll evaluate it. I publish a lot of this work. We've got 2 surgeons coming from Cameroon. And my vision by the end of this year is to have 10 hubs in Africa, just like I've established now a foothold and a presence in every medical school in the UK. I'm onboarding, interviewed Scottish and Irish reps yesterday, onboarding Scotland and Ireland, so that we'll have a footprint that is big. We've put VR headsets on more than thousands of medical students. We'll evaluate it. Very good p-values and statistically significant improvements in knowledge acquisition. So the evidence is there. The framework and the groundwork is there. The tech support is there, and this army that will help me deliver it, but also the content and the hardware.
That's really interesting. So just on the evidence part, are you actually capturing things yourself? I know there's a lot of industry, kind of more general things out there, but you guys are actually capturing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've published the Ugandan experience, the African experience. We've published the motion capture for sick staff in basic life support. I've published the eye gaze with Sam Vine on the basic life support. We've got more than a dozen publications. If you look at some of the p-values in multiple procedures, highly statistically significant. We won a prize at the Association of Surgeons in conference in Dublin last month on presentation. So we capture a lot of that data. We evaluate it. And what's going to be really interesting is when we start to bring in things like eye tracking for AI approaches and adaptive learning and that immersive experience, and we're capturing that data as well.
And is that so? I know you just laid out kind of what you're doing over the next maybe year, but looking to the future, what would you kind of mid to longer term? Are you seeing more AI, and what would you love to see if you could have anything?
And so we're doing that. We're going to be. I think data is the key. We're capturing, tracking in immersive experiences in which we can, and then synchronizing that with multiple trainees, but adapting that immersive experience in real time, depending upon the interactions that the students and trainees have, but also where the gaze is, will influence how the simulations then play out and the additional assessments that are built in that are AI generated. So I'm talking about cutting edge techniques. I don't think anybody's doing it globally. AI approaches in adaptive learning, in immersive experiences using extended reality.
Yeah. I think certainly in healthcare, I haven't seen it. I've seen it in kind of more the corporate world where people are using it more for interviewing and helping people with those sort of soft skill techniques using AI kind of avatars to. But yeah, that's really interesting. We know you've got to go for you've got to go and do some surgery at the moment, back to your day job. So we probably don't want to hold you up any longer.
That's okay. I've got a few more minutes if you have any more questions. I'm delighted to see you guys producing these podcasts. I think that's the way of bringing the community together. We do have a VRiMS conference planned at the end of this year. It will be focused on the students, and we'll be having some external speakers coming, probably in London later this year. I will probably run XR UK alternate years. I think I want to just bring together this massive talent pool that I've managed to tap into to be able to give something back and just see where the projects are and continue to publish. I could take any more questions or.
I think again, one of the reasons we want to do this is just to promote. Like you say, the industry kind of I describe it as a kind of an airplane that's trying to take off the runway and it's not quite making it. And that's kind of like what the XR industry has been like. But I think one of the reasons for that as well is that there's not enough exposure of what's going on. I think there is good work going on like this, like you mentioned, and other people. So we hope to have kind of different a variety of guests on who will show what they're doing. And like I said, I'm still amazed. You know, you're like a medic. You're about to go and do surgery, and you're doing the stuff that I do full time. You're doing on the side. So it's quite interesting.
It's a little bit fragmented, I think, in terms of the mindset, and that's why bringing together the communities, bringing together the opportunities and the potential collaborations is really important. I've not been able to really put my finger on why it hasn't massively taken off, and I think addressing content, addressing hardware, but I think it's the people. Once you start to put these headsets on people's faces, it's quite compelling and it's quite convincing. So that is the biggest and the strongest kind of motivation that I have, is to put those headsets on as many people as I possibly can, because once they get that penny drop moment, you'll build a whole army of people realizing the potential of this technology. And then it simply becomes too big to be ignored. And then colleges, the associations, the societies, they'll see that actually everybody's talking about it. And why aren't we getting on board? Of course, the evidence is one important part, but you can write papers ad infinitum. It's not necessarily going to reach that point where the plane takes off. The plane will take off when all the passengers are wearing a headset on and telling the pilot to take off, because everybody can see we need to do that.
No. I like it. That's the future, I guess. But and we're all doing a little bit to try and help that, push it along. But yeah,
fantastic.
Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Have a good day, Pat. It's a lovely sunny day. I'll be out in the cricket pavilion this evening watching my son. On what I hope is the beginning of a great cricket season. Have a good evening.
Excellent. Take care of yourself. All the best, Jag.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.